The U.S. and Iran holding high-stakes talks over the regime's nuclear program. Evidently, they want to build one again. The meeting happened in Oman. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner there leading the talks. President Trump is demanding zero nuclear capabilities. Forget about weaponizing to a certain level, something Tehran has rejected in the past. So what could make this deal happen, and what would it look like for America? And should the nuclear program be the only thing on the table? Joining us now is the CEO of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Mark Dubowitz. Mark, I always thought that if you try to rebuild your nuclear program in Iran, we're going to blow it up again. Either us or Israel. We'll flip a coin. So what are we really negotiating here?
Well, Brian, what we should be negotiating is the defeat of the Islamic Republic. It should be the absolute dismantlement of its nuclear program, its ballistic missile program, its end for terrorism, and we should also be demanding that they release political prisoners and stop brutalizing and murdering tens of thousands of Iranians.
They're not going to listen to us. They haven't. The president said don't do it. They killed 30 to 40,000. We're seeing some of the video now. It's horrific, as you can imagine. And the nuclear program, it doesn't talk about ballistic missiles, and it doesn't talk about not funding their terror proxy groups, Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas.
Well, those are the demands of the United States. I mean, President Trump has suggested that. Marco Rubio has talked about that. The lead negotiator, Steve Witkoff, has said that. So the Iranians today are the weakest point in the history of the Islamic Republic since the revolution. And so we should be demanding that they start acting like a normal nation and not the leading state sponsor of terrorism and this most severe threat to the United States as they build an intercontinental ballistic missile program to target the American homeland. This should not be just a nuclear deal. It should be a deal that strips them of their most dangerous capabilities.
Do you believe a plan's in place to take them out? They've been a nemesis. They've been a problem with us since 1979. They're still threatening our president. They're still after John Bolton, still after Mike Pompeo, still after Brian Hook, threatening their lives. We know they tried to create terror wherever they can in Iraq, where you have 2,000 guys. It's a quote Mick in all the Rockies that he survived. What are we waiting for?
Yeah, and they try to kill President Trump twice. So I think General Kane, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has prepared detailed plans and options for President Trump. And General Kane, as you remember, is a former Special Forces officer. He's not a normal Army officer. He's going to have a lot of surprises available for the president to implement. And I think we should be striking them hard and going after their missile program. I mean, let's get rid of the last remaining dangerous capability they have. And then if they want to talk, let's talk. But let's leave them without capabilities to threaten America and our allies.
So what should the targets be? The IGRC? Do you think we've identified anybody we can work with in Iran?
Well, I think we potentially could send the message we did like in Venezuela, where President Trump and General Kane captured Maduro and then said to the Venezuelan regime, you know, either you deal with us and we're the new boss in town, or we're going to take the rest of you out. I think we should send the same message to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and those around the Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, that we're either going to kill you or you negotiate with us. Those are your choices.
Mark,
and without that, I think any agreement that we sign with them, yeah.
So now we know there's a formula where you can go in, remove a problem, but we don't want to own the country. We don't want to pick up their trash. We don't want to handle their payroll. We just want to eliminate the threat and allow the people, if they can, to have a role in their government. We know the only reason why this government's in power is because they got the guns and the people don't.
That's right, Brian. I mean, first of all, 90% of Iranians despise this regime. They were on the streets. Hundreds of thousands of them were on the streets, maybe over 1 million. They came to the streets because President Trump said, go to the streets, take over your institutions, get rid of your leadership, help us on the way. America has your back. So President Trump had made it really clear. Unfortunately, right down a red line, and the Iranians massacred their way through that by killing 30, 40,000 of their fellow citizens. So I think President Trump understands that. He does not want to be Barack Obama. He won't do a stupid nuclear deal, and he won't let another dictator run right through a red line that the United States has set.
If something's going to happen, when do you think it'll happen?
Well, I think there's a few things that President Trump still needs to do. I mean, we're moving air defense assets into the region. Obviously, the Central Command, General Kane, and others are putting together the options, working through them, thinking through contingencies. So once everything is prepared and President Trump has what he needs, think he's giving negotiations a chance. The Iranians are continuing to be stubborn and recalcitrant at the table. And then President Trump knows that any deal he signs with them, they will violate. And they'll especially violate when he's gone, when another president is there who's not as determined as President Trump. So I think he knows a deal with this regime is not worth the paper that it's written on it.
We've had the same problem since 1979. It's not going to go away until it's addressed directly. And we're not even having direct talks. We're in separate rooms with an emissary, which is a farce. Mark Dubowitz, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain podcast for full episodes right now.